Hello and welcome everyone, Joe and Mark again, and Colin, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a beautiful day. I'm in Surrey. I don't know where you guys all are. Now I'm just looking. I don't know that there is a way that we can get your video working. I think there probably isn't, but we can at some stages get you to do some questions and answers. So I'm hoping at the bottom of your screen you might be able to see kind of a Q&A thing there, and also there's a chat box. So myself and Anjana and Joe are going to be looking at the technical bits of that. As Jeremy says, we are recording, so if you miss a vital question, you will be able to see this at another time or replay. And also we've got my contact details at the end, so you will be able to come back and ask us some questions. I'm going to share some slides now. Now, Joe, just make sure that you can see my presentation. Joe, give me thumbs up. Brilliant, thank you, Joe. So my name is Alison Pello. I'm the business owner of an organisation called People Vision Limited. We've been in operation for nearly 19 years. So like lots of you, it's my own business. It's a different business to yours. Mine's a people business and we're selling a service, but nevertheless, I am feeling your pain. It is a very challenging time. We deliver training in a training room. So, you know, that also fell off a cliff, which is very worrying. So we got our heads together, Joe and Anjana and I, and thought, right, what can we do that's going to help organisations to unpick some of this mental health? And, you know, we didn't want to sit there doing nothing. So we decided we would contact a few organisations and see if we could get out there and share some of the good news, or not the good news, you know, some of our information. So we've got Joe and Anjana will introduce themselves in just a second, but just to tell you about People Vision. So we've delivered in excess of 500 training sessions in the mental health arena alone. We do other training sessions, you know, we do management and leadership training sessions, but specifically on mental health. And we've delivered that to over 7,500 delegates. And that's within about the last 12 months, actually, the sort of output that we've done. So Joe has a mental health background. She'll tell you about that. And Anjana is more on the leadership end of wellness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over in a second to Anjana, and then we'll go to Joe. But just some ground rules. It's about a 1 hour session. It is recorded. Now, please do use the chat function. And I can see a couple of people, I've got to put my glasses on. I can see a few people are chatting on there. That's brilliant. If you've got questions as we go along, you can either use that or the chat box, the questions box, and we'll try and feed those questions into to the chat that we're doing. And you know, we work as a team, don't we, Anjana and Joe? Yeah, we just like to. We're quite happy with women. We interrupt each other. We're not bothered about that. You know, we want to make it, you know, something that suits you, the audience. And we understand you're smaller business owners, maybe with about 30 people working in your organisation, and you might not have access to people like ourselves. So we're very happy to take your questions either as we go along or at the end, or indeed after the I want to say the show, but it's not a show, after the session. You know, if you want to, I can unmute you if we come to a stage where somebody wants to ask a question. You know, we'll try and work with the technology. If the technology falls over and you're booted off the call, just click straight back in and we should all be here, hopefully. So if you need to take a call, put yourself on mute again, you know, leave the room, minimise the distractions around you, dogs barking, postman coming, that type of thing. And yeah, as Jeremy says, the call will be recorded. So Anjana, just before we move to Joe, maybe just introduce yourself, then when you come in later it'll make more sense, and then hand over to Joe. Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks, Alison. I'm Anjana Rajani, and I have a specialism in leadership, coaching and training, and I'm especially interested in authenticity and emotional leadership, because I actually think right now in these times, this is where we need to focus our energy as leaders and managers. So that's a little bit about me, and I will chat to you in a little while, and I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Thank you, Anjana. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jo Purusa. My background, actually, I was a mental health nurse for 25 years in the NHS, lots of different clinical experience, but I was also a directorate manager for forensic psychiatry, so quite high pressured and challenging, and so I'm experiencing lots of challenges the way that you do as well. So now I'm a mental health coach, and I've been working with Alison for People Vision for the last maybe 8 or 9 months now, with the Department of Work and Pensions delivering mental health training to their staff, which is hopefully they are using everything that we have been delivering to them during this challenging time for that group of staff as well. And I also have my own one-to-one clients and run my own business, so there's challenges there for everybody. Thank you. Okay, so I'm starting off the session this morning for us all, and this is the programme. So we're going to be looking at wellbeing, self-care and resilience, how to manage stress and anxiety in your workforce, but also yourself as well, how to lead and motivate a remote team effectively, home working and being productive, reducing tensions at home, and giving your team confidence to return to the workplace. And finally, supporting others with mental ill health. So these are the challenges that we know that you're facing right now. So reduction in workforce due to sickness, self-isolation, remote working and maintaining relationships and communication, being a leader through the change, what that feels like and what that looks like for you, and giving your team confidence to return to the workplace. So all of these will be covered in our session today.
I'm wondering as well, Joe, if people want to just put on the chat box, is there something that we've missed? Is there something, obviously we understand the pressures that people are under with all of the above, but you know, if people could just start to put into the chat some of the things that they're finding particularly challenging. I think maybe quite a lot of you are owner operators, so then these may be family businesses as an example. So, you know, what is it that you are, you know, that must bring a real particular pressure, hey, having a family business. Maybe if it's the generations, you know, that must be very, very difficult. And people being isolated at home. So, Joe, back to you.
Thank you. So we really want to encourage you to engage in this session this morning and get the most out of it that's going to benefit you and your teams as well. So please use the chat box, ask questions, and like Alison says, we'll do our best to be answering those questions as we go along. So I'm going to start the first session this morning, and we're going to be looking at well-being. So the slide that you can see now is showing us what's important towards our well-being. But we know right now at this time we are faced with multiple opposing challenges for our well-being and how we look after ourselves and what's really crucial. Because if as leaders and managers we're not actually looking after ourselves, then we're not going to be in the best place to look after our teams and people that are experiencing difficulties. So it's a really important time to start prioritizing you at this time. So if we think about ourselves and what we're made up physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So our physical health right now is really, really important. Moving, exercising, eating the right foods, getting the right amount of sleep and rest. And I know, you know, from working at home, there's so much online to be able to contribute to all of these right now. And many of the online sessions are all free of charge. So if you're not involved in anything around your physical health, now is a really, really good time to start looking at that. And now we've got more freedom to actually go out for walks. So that's really helpful as well. So our physical health is really important. Our spiritual health, a sense of purpose and a sense of who we are and what matters to us and being valued, that all contributes to our well-being. So last week we had Mental Health Awareness Week, where the focus was on being kind and kindness, and that came from the death of Caroline Flack a few months ago. And there's a lot of research now as well to show that being kind really does impact on our chemicals in our brain, and that helps us feel better and feel good about when we do an act of kindness for somebody that is random perhaps, or even if you've thought about sharing something with somebody, it actually really does improve our mental well-being and our mental health. Our emotions, how we feel right now, our engagement levels, our positive emotions. And again, there's a big emphasis here on being valued, and do we feel valued right now at this very moment in time. But you will know yourself whether you feel engaged in activity at home, where your motivation levels are. So that might be something that you might want to consider during this session today, thinking about that. And so perhaps thinking about, on a scale of 0 to 10, where are you right now? What is your self-reflection on your well-being and your motivation? If it's 0, then that's really low. But if it's 10, then that's obviously the highest point. Or are you somewhere in between? You know, you might put yourself as a 5 or a 6. And what things can you do then to improve that over the next few weeks that are going to really help you and your well-being, your self-care, which ultimately are all going to help you build up your strength and your resilience.
Yeah, can I just chip in there?
Yeah.
Just something I was talking to a couple of business owners the other day, and you know, things are quiet for some of them, and sometimes we don't necessarily give ourselves permission to take the day off, especially when we are own business owners. And you know, and what he was saying is actually, you know, there's taking time off, and then there's the guilt. So sometimes it's okay to give ourselves permission just to do nothing.
Yeah.
And not feel guilty about that, and that can really, really help our mental well-being. And yesterday, I'm a business owner, and I took the day off, and I spent some time in our jacuzzi. I spent some time out in our garden having a picnic, and it was just joyful. And what the difference that made was huge. And I made the decision. And when you make that decision, you remove the guilt.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to kind of partake that and give that to you guys. Maybe that would be useful.
Definitely, I'm with you on that. And again, being the business owner, I don't know whether there's a difference. Maybe there is or isn't a different mindset with people who are employed. Though some of the people on the call may be furloughed, they may not be furloughed, and if they're not furloughed, they might be a bit irritated they're not furloughed because other people in the business might be furloughed, and vice versa. You know, a lot of people are sitting on the beach who are being paid potentially 100% of their salaries, you know, sitting quite pretty, you know, and that brings a little bit of tension, I think, within either families or within communities and different things. But I think you're absolutely right, Anjana. I sort of went into a bit of first of all, we went, you know, when it stopped in March, you know, I was doing credit control, and then I was doing this, and I was looking at my systems, and I was like that. And now I just think, why everyone else seems to have done this pillar 3, Joe, you know, this emotional and how they're engaged and this, and that. And I'm like, I haven't done any of that. I'm just like, I've not connected. I've done a little bit of gardening and that's it. So I also thought, oh, the weather is going to turn nice. Okay, come on, there's a bank holiday, half term, I'm just gonna stop. I can't furlough myself because I still need to run the business, so it wouldn't be ethical for me to furlough myself. But I think certainly to take some time off, as you say, guilt-free. And actually now I'm thinking, oh, I wish we'd put this webinar on next week. I wish I had the whole week off. You know what I mean? I've broken the seal of wanting to be a bit more emotional and connected with all of that, and slow down. So yeah, I think you're right. Just to stop is really important. Back to you, Joe.
No, I think that they're really good points, actually, because my next point was going to be around what we do when we actually face loss. And you know, the reality of it is we've faced obvious losses, but also we're facing hidden loss as well. So our body wants us to slow down. immediately when we face loss. And then we want to maintain, and perhaps that's where a lot of people are at the moment, is maintaining something that's consistent in their life. And then we want to regroup. So the regrouping, if you look at that as heading back into what will be work in the future. So that's what happens when we experience that loss. We want to slow down.
Yeah, I mean, the spiritual piece. Again, I had other friends saying to me they would sit at the dinner table and say what they were grateful for each night. I was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool, but that's just not my style. My style was just to kind of carry on and go, right, I've moved my business to SharePoint, or I've done all these other kind of things, you know. So I think, you know, whilst these pillars are great, I don't think we can expect everything to resonate with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about taking away what resonates with you individually and what will help you. And these are all guidance. And I think one of the most important things about our self-care and well-being is finding a routine that works for you now. So that may look really different to what it did before, when you were going out to work and you had your journey to work. But it's adapting and finding something now that helps you stay motivated, helps you with your vision, you know, practicing some of the kindness, the gratitude, like Alison said, that have all really got a lot of research showing that they do help and they do work. And it is about us mentally taking one thing at a time. Journaling perhaps is another really good way of getting clear on what you want to do. You know, just writing down your thoughts in the morning, writing down your thoughts in the evening, and gaining clarity. And these are all things that are going to really help towards building up your resilience. Trying not to have too many distractions. So taking on too many things all at once. And again, that can lead back to what Anjana was talking about, you know, not perhaps getting things finished in the same way that you would perhaps when you were in work. And is there a guilt feeling around that, you know, trying to let that go and focusing on a bit less, but getting things completed. So
yeah.
Sorry,
I wonder how many people on the call. Thanks. I am looking at the chat comments as well. So thanks so much for the honesty and some of the stuff that's coming up on there. It's really good. And when relevant, I'll bring those points in. I wonder how many people on the call, or maybe someone in their household, you know, started an enormous list of all the things they were going to do through lockdown. And I wonder how far down that list they got. I wonder if they felt overwhelmed. I wonder if they binned the list. I wonder, you know, and again, that we mustn't feel guilt about that. I think it's for some people to do more, to be active is positive, and for others to reflect, you know, and to sit back, you know, and to feel worried. You know, also what we haven't talked about so far, you know, is people's personal situations. And somebody has already said, you know, I wasn't well, but potentially I've had mental health illness in, over time, and maybe people within your workforce have, you know, all of that will start to bubble up. Well, I mean, you know, it's probably already bubbled up, and if it hasn't already, it may do. So yeah, but back over to you, Joe.
Okay, so these really are a guide to how you can start looking after yourself, adopting some of the practices that can really have a very positive outcome for you, but also for members of your team as well. And ultimately, they will start to build up on resilience. It's interesting that Alison said that, because I was reading this morning, and it actually said, when the country is in chaos, everybody has a plan to fix it. And I know that when we were into chaos, I had a plan to fix everything in my house that I'd neglected for such a long time. I did some of it, but I didn't actually finish all of it. So I absolutely relate to that of actually getting things done mode. And some people, and
that's why volunteering becomes so important. You know, people want to, like, people think I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm making baking for the NHS. I've been making little jam pots, and it's your little way to be able to contribute and take control over the little thing that you can take control on.
Yeah, and it's about, you know, it's about being valued, isn't it? Going back to our emotions, we want to feel, as human beings, we want to feel valued. We want to be engaged in things that we do, and we want to do those things well. I don't think anybody actually wants to work and do a bad job. We all want to do a really good job. So I think we're going to go on to a poll now.
Yeah, right, bear with, there we go. Let's see.
If you could give us your, and it's so good to see lots of good chat going on in the chat as well. And Matt's, that's brilliant. You've worked hard on keeping a structure and balance, exercise, family, work, hobbies and chores. You know, that's really good. And I hope that you're finding the benefit of that as well, Matt's. So this poll is, what do you find most useful? Walking or exercise, a good book, restricting the amount of news intake, box sets, and hobbies that you forgot you liked. So I think you can have more than one of those, but if you would like to fill that out and submit it, that would be great.
So 12 people, 45% of people have voted. So if you could vote as quick as possible, that'd be good. Then we can end the polling. Don't worry, the information doesn't go anywhere. It's not like the new app, which somebody messaged me today saying who will be partaking in the new app, you know, for this track and trace. I mean, I don't do answers on a postcard. We don't need to know what people are thinking today. But, you know, it's kind of interesting how people will feel about that. Okay, so most of you voted, 91%. So I'm going to end that poll now. And there we go. That's what hang on, share results. There we go. So I'm hoping, can you see the results, Joe?
I can. So 59%. Walking or other exercise, so a pretty active group we've got on today. So that's brilliant, because there's a really big strong link between physical health and our mental health, and how physical health is so good for our mental health. A good book, 6%. Restricting amount of news intake, 19%. I'll be honest, I have read news, but I've not watched any news for 9 weeks, and I made that decision at the very beginning. 3% on box sets. Hobbies you forgot you'd liked, 13%. I'd like to know what those hobbies were actually that you forgot.
Yeah, so would I.
That'd be really interesting. So thank you for sharing those. I just need to close that off my screen, Alison, 1 second. Yeah. Okay.
So can you see the slide now that says
Yeah.
change? Good, good, good.
So we're moving on now to managing stress, managing change, stress and anxiety. So I hope you would all agree that we all need some stress in our life. Why? Because it keeps us productive. It helps us to be productive and complete tasks that we all perhaps don't like doing. But it's so important. But it's the prolonged stress that can have a poor impact on our body and mind, leading to mental health issues if not addressed. So statistically, I kind of looked at some figures this morning. I just think it's really interesting in terms of workforce, really, more so than anything else. It's 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health issue each year. 1 in 3 if you're in Scotland, actually, just so I'm clear on that, because I have been corrected about that in the past when I've been delivering mental health training in Scotland. They're very adamant that theirs is 1 in 3.
So they're more stressed.
Yes, there's a higher statistic in Scotland. And 1 in 10 under 18-year-olds. So that's, yeah. So that's in terms of, so 1 in 4 for the UK each year will experience a mental health issue. Now, that does not mean that they have a mental health condition, which we'll come on to a little bit later in the morning. So these are issues. So these will be things that you hear reported into work, such as stress and anxiety, that don't require a diagnosis, but they're having an impact on that person's ability to be productive, to function, and on their emotional health and well-being. So what can you do? So we've already discussed this really in great detail before. It's about keeping a routine. We know that the routines are really important, and keeping in contact with that person if you know they are struggling with stress and anxiety, because that for somebody at home right now might look quite different to what it would look like if they were able to come into work, because we know for a lot of people that coming into work can be a stress relief as well. And then staying at home can increase that stress because there's no escape and nowhere to go. It's really important. Communication is so key when working with people that have got stress and anxiety, because often their stress and anxiety comes from the fear of not knowing. So when they asking for information and maybe contacting you more frequently than what they would do normally, it's because they really want a way of helping them to reduce their own anxiety and stress. So staying connected with people is crucial.
And I think that rolls out, if you look at the government who starts to invite members of the public to be part of the press conferences. I just think on a massive level, that was their way of allowing people to feel part of that kind of Q&A piece.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. Because we all want to be, included. It goes back to our well-being again, doesn't it? About being valued, being heard, being listened to. It's really, really important, particularly with somebody that does have an experience of living with stress and anxiety. They also need someone to talk to that they can trust. And likewise, you would as well. So it's about finding that person that you can be really truthful and open and honest with. It's not too long ago that I was with a session in the Department of Work and Pensions, and a lady asked to speak to me at the end of the session, and she was really upset about something, and I couldn't work out what was going on for her. And she told me at the end of the session, after everybody had left, that she'd been coming into work for 15 years and not told anybody that her husband had a mental health condition and that she'd lived with that for 15 years.
Yeah.
So, the reality right now for somebody like her, and I use her as an example because actually she's got nowhere to come to anymore. So she's at home, probably working from home maybe, or maybe she is in work, but maybe having to spend more time at home and not getting away from that home environment, which could be potentially really quite stressful. So that had quite an impact on me, actually. And later on, we're going to look at a wellness plan, and I can talk you through a little bit more about that and how that worked with that lady to help her deal with her stress and anxiety.
Yeah. So there's some fantastic things coming up about how people are managing their stress. Somebody's spending more time with their teenage children. Joe, I'm not sure that we would agree with that, but somebody's spending more time with their teenage children. Who usually focused on friends and keeping a family unit time. That's fantastic. And slowing down, cooking and enjoying a family meal in the evening. And these are relatively, listen, not to belittle things, it's like we're lucky that, I don't mean to be extreme or anything, but that we can buy nice food, hopefully all of us on the call, and we can afford to do that, and that we have a nice space to spend and have our dinner together, and and that hopefully our home life, I mean, Joe can maybe bring on that there is obviously other things that we need to be aware of. The domestic violence situation is bad, but there is lots of really good space. People are talking about their allotments, what's this person said? Somebody said about working in a lung department at a hospital. I mean, that's amazing. So people doing things within their community as well, which means that they can share, and it feels like you're doing something. So there's lots of really good things. I'm wondering what people are doing to stay. And by the way, not everybody wants to stay connected to other people. And
absolutely.
We were talking on a call we did on last week, and we called it the Zoom Doom. You're just having one flipping Zoom call too many. And I am, if you can't really tell, I'm an extreme extrovert, and I love people, and I just can't get enough of people. But actually, last week I'd also kind of just, my eyes were hurting with all the Zooms and this and that. So, I'm just wondering what people are doing to stay connected. Maybe could you put that on the chat? Some of those ideas. Joe, what have you, or Anjana, what have you been doing to stay? Or indeed, are you happy to not to stay connected to people?
Yeah, I think it's a balance of both, and it's an interesting question because I'm a real extrovert, but I've gone into myself, and I'm wondering if other people have too. And my dad is stuck in India at the moment, so we have a daily call with him, which I never would have done. Like, I never would have made that time. I've actually scheduled it into my diary, 2 o'clock every day, and we have a 15-minute conversation, and it's really, really lovely. Do this, and staying connected with family, but also enjoying my little bubble at the moment. And I'm wondering actually if other people are feeling like that too. So just having that balance, chatting to friends. I mean, WhatsApp's great, isn't it? You can just pull it out and send a text. Yeah, so a bit of both, really.
Joe?
I think that I really like my own company. I'm not sure my kids like my company. However, I am their mother after all. But I've quite enjoyed reconnecting with people that I'd not managed to stay in touch with prior to this because we were all really busy.
Yeah.
I think that I've really come to appreciate them a lot more as well.
Yeah, I see somebody on here says they're a bit quizzed out, and I get that. People are teaching and texting elderly parents, and I think that's great.
That's great.
The assumption is that it's going to be really easy to get elderly or people who are more challenged technologically, people up to date. I think that's great if you can do that. We've personally connected on a very local level within our roads, and that's been, I'd already, because I'm a busybody, I'd already started up a road WhatsApp group, kind of the local 2-3 roads WhatsApp group, and that just like within that first week in March just went ping, and that has been invaluable. Somebody messaged this morning, who's got some icing sugar, and that sort of level of connection with somebody 4 doors down is so important. So all of these are ways to manage your stress and anxiety. And fantastic, guys. 2 Ps, keep these things up. Max says he's writing cards to a range of people. I mean, that's just lovely because things don't happen in the postage. But also, and I'm seeing Danielle, and I saw someone else said about having weekly calls. I also did that with my team, and actually because they were their mums, we decided to do that on a Tuesday night. We did a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and we just, every week, because they were busy during the day, I just said, right. So for those first, well, in fact, we stopped it last week because I felt there was a shift change myself. We'd sort of done our weekly calls, and it wasn't so necessary moving forward, but it was certainly that level of connectivity when we were all going, what is going on? So I'm delighted to see, and if you're not and you haven't been able to connect virtually, I urge you all, you're all on a Zoom call today, to connect with your teams. I know Anjana is our teams expert, managing people, but putting people in isolation. And I'm not saying everybody on the call is isolated in home working, but there are impacts of that. So is it Joe doing home working or Anjana? It's Anjana. Okay, over to Anjana.
Hi everyone. So I don't know how many of you are actually working from home at the moment, and we've just got some tips on really making the best use of working from home and making it work for you. So what are some of the things that you have considered changing as you're working from home? So let's look at that. I think it's really important, first of all, to establish what challenges are at home. Who's at home? Who's likely to walk in when you're on a conference call? Are there some children? Is there a partner? Or are you on your own? And that produces its own challenges. So, thinking about what considerations you have to make when you're working from home. And let's be practical. Look, we do have lives, and we are working from home. And if you've got children and, you need to kind of adjust your start and finish times, then make that known. Like, agree it. It's a bit like giving yourself permission to take a day off. Give yourself permission to start and finish at different times. Obviously, communicate that with your team, And you know, if you are employed, agree it with your boss. But if you are the boss, give yourself a break and make those adjustments. You know, it's really interesting because leadership is so important in terms of setting the temperature. So, you know, whatever you're doing, your team are going to follow, whether you're telling them about it, physically speaking about it or not, emotionally, they're going to get it. So, you know, looking after yourself in these really, really challenging times it becomes crucial. Setting boundaries. So, you know, if you do have young children or if you have a spouse, you know, tell them what your plan is in terms of work. You know, so what I've decided is 10 till 5, I'm working, I'll come out for lunch, let's meet then. You know, make this known. It makes it so much easier in terms of stress levels. So if you are a manager, stay connected, stay in contact. You know, you just don't know what's going on with your team. So, and, you know, in these times when you've got a team working from home as well, contact becomes even more important, because you can't have that coffee chat in the office. You know, you can't have those, and it becomes quite isolated, especially for those that are actually on their own and don't like their own company. Have a space, set a space. If you're lucky enough to have a home office, that's great, because you can close the door. If not, then create a space where this is your workspace. In my home, you know, my son's taken over the dining room, the other son's got an office, I've got my own office, and my husband goes to another place, the den. So, you know, we've all got our own little places, and so, you know, make that happen, set it up.
But you're lucky. If I just interrupt, you're lucky. Yeah, we don't know who's on the call. I've just, and I see that Elizabeth has just said she's returning to work. I'm assuming she's on furlough at the moment. She's within her home, and she's got to set up, and she's got children and you know, dogs and maybe not dogs, but yeah, she's got pets. They could be any pets. But I think what happened when the lockdown happened. Now, probably Anjana, Joe, and I work from home a lot of the time anyway. I don't know whether Jeremy, give me a nod. Do you normally work at home? Or are you working at night? So, you know, very quickly people had to create a space where they don't normally. And, you know, people with multiple children who suddenly needed extra laptops for school and extra monitors. And, you know, I'm lucky, I do have a house that's big enough for all of us, and I only have one child, so then she had a laptop and iPad, so that was fine. But I think you know, you just need to be a bit creative. The other thing, I'll go back to you in just a second, Angela, but the other thing is just sitting yourself. So if Elizabeth, who is going to research to her, just really thinking about, in fact, all of you, you know, when you set up your little home space, you're probably sitting at kitchen tables, this and that. Watch your back. There's going to be a lot more back complaints, you know, wrist, RSIs, you know, so make sure that it's not only as quiet, you know, even if you get yourself some headsets, you know, make the logistics of it, but also your ergonomics are really, really important. Actually, that's another thing we've been asked to do by a client, is just to send out a little, you know, crib sheet to check, is your home working space a safe place for you to be? And I don't mean emotionally, although that's important, I mean physically. But Anjana, back to you.
Yeah, and that is also important. And for some of you, this is going to be a challenge, especially if you live in a confined space. And, you know, and it is a challenge. So make sure that you look after your own mental well-being and go for those walks and get some outdoor space, because it can become quite claustrophobic, and I get that. The other thing that's really important is setting boundaries in terms of your own what I've noticed is a lot of people are working far too much since lockdown. The door is not closing. You know, find yourself that metaphoric door that says, right, it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to shut the door and stop working now. You know, we're zoomed out. We've got lots and lots of connection online. It's tiring. It's tiring. So take time out. Make sure you take time out for lunch. Make sure you set those boundaries for yourself. And, you know, if you do have to set up conference calls, set them up, if you can, at times that work for you, in line with your family and the disturbances, because it can be really stressful when you've got a child and you're trying to do a conference call. you know, trying to manage them both, and, you know, make it known that, look, my child might come and disturb me. If you've got children, people understand, people get it, we're human, you know, we're working from home, so give yourself again permission for those interruptions.
And give your team, I think, if you're leaders and managers, you know, make sure that you are oh God, what's the word? You know, understanding of your team and the pressures that they are under.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think Victoria's just said, you know, she's homeschooling as well. I mean, it's really, really tough. It's tough. So, you know, take that into account and make it known to you, if you're employed, make it known to your manager in terms of what support you actually need. If you can't do the hours that you're employed to do, then make it known and negotiate. Maybe you can do some hours after they go to bed, or after dinner when things aren't so stressful. So make those adjustments, make it known.
And just so you know, the little tomato on there, he's called a Pomodoro, and and he's just a little timer. So if you feel that you would benefit, you just buy those on Amazon and you ting it around for 20 minutes, and you do a job for 20 minutes, and then you leave, you know, and then it's another way, you know, to keep active, keep up and moving around, and not to get too focused.
Yeah, I think we've got a poll coming up now.
We have. All right, bear with. Okay, poll.
The other thing I was going to say whilst we wait for the poll is, you know, our attention span is quite limited. So doing just one thing at a time is quite useful. Here's the poll then. What do you think your team find most challenging about this time? You know, what do you think? Isolation, trying to work with a full home. Maybe this is also part of how you're feeling, worrying about family and loved ones.
I think they're worried about competition. I see there's something going on with Dave Krapps and Colin Sheargold about, I suspect they're kind of competing people selling some sort of fancy furniture. Is that right, Jeremy? I don't know. Okay, so 45% of you have, I'm right, thank you, Colin. Okay, nothing like a little bit of a tick there. Okay, so we've got 54% of you. If you could just quickly vote, that would be great. Then we can get an idea and I can share the results. Yeah, I think it might be something else that your team are worrying about. Oh, okay, Herman Miller. Okay, nice. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to end that polling, and then there we go. Share, so you should be able to see the results.
Okay. So the highest looks like you're mainly worrying about business implications, and that's totally understandable, because, you know, when we come through this, how does the business look? Like, what changes are actually going to happen? And change is difficult anyway. It can invoke all sorts of emotions for all of us, because there is so much in the unknown. And you know, and going back to Joe's point around stress and anxiety, this just heightens it. So I completely get that.
Yeah, okay. All right, hang on a second. I'm going to share.
So as we come back and think about actually returning to work, I don't know how many of you are thinking about returning to work, your team's coming back to work, or how many of you are still on furlough, etc. But, you know, this is going to be difficult. It really is. I was looking at some research yesterday, CIPD research on how people are feeling about coming back to work. 4 in 10 people are anxious about returning to work, and this makes leaders' jobs more challenging, because, you know, we've got to address that. But the first point is really about managing your own mental health. You know, thinking about, are you ready, and what support do you need? Because, you know, as leaders and managers, we often think about everybody else and forget about ourselves. But actually, if we're not good, if we're not in the right space, then we're not going to be able to lead effectively. And I know that sounds really obvious, but do we actually take the time to really think about our own well-being? Because sometimes we're too busy thinking about everybody else's. especially in those positions, especially when you've got to make such challenging decisions as well that impact your whole team. So what about some practicalities around returning to work? You know, what sort of health and safety considerations do you have to make? You know, the whole government guidance around, you know, is it still possible for your team to work from home? Don't discount that. You know, let's just keep everyone safe. Have you considered the possibility for your team to continue to work from home? Have you thought about the COVID assessments?
What's the COVID assessment? Is that, tell us more, Anjana?
Yeah, so, you know, thinking about the 2 meters distance, you know, all of that sort of thing, thinking about the risk assessments, thinking about, you know, shifts. If you're manufacturing and you've got different shifts, can you reduce the shifts, change the shifts, put more shifts on so less people are working at the same time? So, you know, thinking about things creatively, you know, that is a really useful thing to do. Look, this is completely unknown territory.
I think actually by way of sharing, if people are comfortable, if they've come up with some light bulbs that they're going to, of getting people back to work, it'd be really, really good to share on the chat. If like Anjana's just given a couple of ideas. So within your world of work, let's say, okay, the finance people can stay at home and the HR people can stay at home, but actually you're manufacturing, you're making your fabulous chairs or whatever it is that you're making, or your wallpapers or whatever. You know, what is it that you have thought, okay, in our workplace we can do X, and you're happy to share that? It'd be really, really kind of you to do that.
Yeah.
Back to you, Anjana.
Absolutely. And, you know, it is unknown territory. We've got to be practical. There may be times where, you know, you can't necessarily do exactly what you need to do, but, you know, can you do your best? You know, because that's what you've got to do. And continuing to work with HR, if you've got a HR department, continuing to you know, work with the union. But the most important thing is about communicating. You know, are you communicating everything with your team? Look, if they're anxious about, if 4 in 10 people are anxious about returning, the one thing that we can do to allay that anxiety is to communicate. You know, tell people what you're going to do, tell them when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, give them more information, repeat, you know, because sometimes people won't hear you because they're in their own heads thinking about whatever's going on in their world and in their life.
And actually, on that point, communicate, people will only hear, well, they'll only hear what sometimes they want to hear. We all know that. And also the percentage, Joe, I think you knew the percentage of effectiveness of a Zoom communication versus a face-to-face. If we were doing this in the same way in a room, we would hope that the level of communication would go up to about 75% of what you're going to retain, whereas it's going to be about 45%, I think, while we're on here. So, you know, repeat, communicate in different ways. Different people like different things. So back onto that, Anjana, about your emotional leadership. What do you mean about that?
Yeah, you know, I think this is really important because the journey of lockdown for each individual will have been really, really different. And some people may have lost people. Some people may have come through the illness themselves. It's a really difficult time, and we're all human and we've all got emotions. So this, I think, right now and in times of change, the emotional leader really has to step up. And you know what I've noticed, actually, just on an everyday perspective, is when I go out for a walk now or a run, people are checking in with me. Like, I haven't experienced that to this level before ever. You know, oh, hi, how are you? You know, I don't know these people, but they're checking in with me. And so as a leader and as a manager, you know, we've really got to step this up, like in a big way. We've got to tap into our humanity as leaders. And so if you see someone is struggling, if you hear it in their voice, name it, call it out, question it, get your really, really great questions out. I'm sensing that there's something going on here. How are you? Do you want to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, without getting, I'm conscious of time, and without getting into too many rabbit holes, I think that in terms of people's personal safety and domestic violence at home, which is affected with both genders, I think, you know, I think most of your organisations are small enough to know who's in your workforce. Obviously, you don't know what's going on in individual homes, but I think if you've got an organisation of under 50 people, you know, and you're a business leader, you should have had one phone call with each individual member of staff over this period of time and just check in with them, see how they're doing, asking them, you know, and giving them, well, we're going to give you some web links now, but, you know, giving them web links and information about, that's not saying that anyone is suffering from that. It's just saying, if you are, you know, this is some information that they can use.
What's really interesting, I remember years ago working in HR, and the manager saying, but we're not counsellors. And I get that. And yet we are called as leaders to have counselling skills, which is slightly different. Listening, asking questions, reflecting back, empathising. These things become really, really important in these times. And this is really about being human. And going back to Joe's point around kindness and curiosity around supporting your team. So tell people exactly what they want to, exactly what you want them to do. So be very clear in instructions, especially at these times, because it makes it a lot easier for people to follow instructions right now. So they don't have to think about stuff. Consider emotions and understand circumstances. Where possible, adapt your leadership style according to the person that you are managing, because they're all going to need different things. Give people many reasons to do what you want them to do. You know, really give them the whole picture, not just a little bit of it, because otherwise they're not going to really know why you're asking them, and then that will create more anxiety. Be the change you want to inspire in others. This is really important. Lead the way. Lead the way. If you want your team to be motivated, get the support to be motivated yourself. If you want your team to be grounded, ground yourself. Use techniques like meditation and mindfulness. Ground yourself. You know, this is going to be really important, because they're going to be looking to you in terms of how they behave. This comes back to, you know, looking at adaptability and thinking about what actually drives each individual person in your team. Now, what value system do they have? What we tend to do as humans is only look through our own eyes, you know, and thinking about what motivates us. That's not the same for everyone. And again, I said, communicate, communicate, communicate. So handing back to Alison, I think.
Another poll?
Another poll.
Yeah.
So what are you most worried about in terms of returning to work? What's your biggest worry about this?
It's interesting. So again, on the chat, people are saying my life's different. I'm a salesperson, you know, and I go out and I'm out every day. That's really interesting. I actually have one of my clients phone me going, it's a kind of a typical manufacturing client that phoned and said, I don't understand it. This guy's phoning me saying he wants more support, but I don't understand. I've furloughed him and I've paid him 100%. And I said, well, what's his job? He said, he's always been high maintenance. So I was like, well, what's his job? He said, he's a sales guy. He said, I don't understand what to do. And I said, well, have you got an employee assistance program, or have you got anything where he can go and talk to somebody? Oh, I said, do you think he needs to talk? I said, I think maybe he's just struggling, because normally he's out and about knitting, nattering and chatting and mixing, and this is his whole life, is, you know, like the reflexologists who like to touch and feel and be with near people and help. He likes to socialise, and you know, and I noticed another person travels a lot, you know, and if you are contained then completely, you know, things. It's a very big shift for people to make. So if you could, just a few more of you, just do your voting about what you're worried about. Interestingly, people are not really worried about their journey. So maybe you're not such inner city people, and quite a few is something else. Maybe if you keyed in something else, if you're comfortable to share, pop it in the chat box if there's something else that you were worried about. Okay, so that's that. We are obviously chatting. So I'm going to hand back to Joe. Joe, let me quickly, So we've got this slide, and then we're reflecting. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. So this is my last slide for the session. So this is about supporting others with mental ill health. So when I was thinking about this question is how might COVID-19 affect people with their mental health conditions? So people that have possibly had a diagnosis in the past or have a current diagnosis, and what the impact for that person has been. So it's really, really important to think about providing consistent communication. I think that's a kind of a theme that's gone through the whole of this presentation this morning. Is the key is communicating and keeping in contact, because actually that person may feel that they miss the support that they had from a colleague in work perhaps, or a manager that was really supportive to them, and that needs to be continued throughout. Who do they live with? Now, we've already kind of touched on this from home working, but it's actually really important because it might be somebody, they might live with somebody in the home that actually causes them to have more stress and can impact on their health, and they can become unwell because of that. So it's about supporting them and talking about that and finding a way that that person can feel safe and feel productive in their home environment. Ask what help they need. That person is the only person that really knows what they actually need at that time. We can have all these suggestions, but actually what they might need is something simple like, can you call me every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon just to see how I'm getting on today? I'd really appreciate that. And that is all I actually need. Because sometimes when we go all in, that can create more anxiety for somebody with a mental health condition and create problems that actually aren't really there. And that perhaps is about our needs as well as leaders and managers, because like Anjana said, we like to look after, we like to make sure things are running smoothly. And sometimes for somebody with a mental health condition, they just need you to know that they're there, that once a day you've got that arrangement to call in and just to check in, see how they are. Have they got a diagnosed mental health condition? And by that I mean a condition that's been diagnosed through a psychiatrist. So it could be depression, bipolar, OCD, perhaps schizophrenia. So any of the major mental health conditions that people do manage to work with and do hold jobs down with, but as long as they have the correct support. Involving the right people. So that person may also have support from community teams, social workers, and maybe making sure they're staying in contact with those people. In this time, it's been a little bit more challenging for that to happen because normally that would take place face to face. However, some teams are doing Zoom contact and others are doing on telephone contact, so it is still possible, and it's really, really important. Offer signposting, which we've got a whole slide I think around what's available out there. And then, you know, I mentioned earlier on about considering a wellness action plan, and it's a really simple tool, but that can be really effective for both of you, both the manager, the leader, and the member of staff, to work together and identifying what help they need, what keeps them well during this period of time. And that can be agreed and worked on, and then it can be reviewed as well, a bit like a performance and development plan that you might use with your staff around their kind of individual performance in work. So I would really advocate the using of the Wellness Action Plan, and they're available on the Mind website.
We've actually put the link on, which I'll show you.
Link on there, yeah.
Thanks, Jo. So we've kind of whizzed through some areas, you know, just clicking back. So we've looked about your workplace, we've looked at home working, we've looked at managing change and stress, and we've looked at your, you know, looking at it from an individual level. So, you know, Jo's been, you know, concerned with the individual level, and Jana as more as the mentor, coach, leadership. So what we're asking for you, you're not allowed to go until you can put something, you've been so good at putting things on the chat box, you know, and like trainers, you know, we're not doing this just for the good of our health, have we, girls? You know, we want to know what you are going to take away from this. Now, it might be something that you do as an individual. You might go and get your Pomodoro, you might, you know, maybe have lunch with your teenage children that you weren't going to do or something, or it might be something more on a business front, it might be more on a managerial. But if we could start to put some things in the chat box about what you're going to take away. Jeremy, I'm teeing you up. I'm going to ask you something, but I'll give you a few minutes to reflect before we go live to Jeremy and his Venetian blinds. Perhaps, you know, if you could all pop something in. You know, what's really nice on the chat there is that James is saying what he does, and other people are offering support. Colin Shergold's offering support. So obviously through your organisation that you're working with today, I'm sure there's other, like, I know Jeremy's been putting on other events and things. So obviously this community that you've got here, I'm sure can help in a non-competitive way to help, you know, what it can do. But so Ian says it has reinforced that I'm doing the best I can do in the circumstances. You know what? If you walk away and you've reflected and you thought that, fantastic, you know, that's exactly what we want. So you want to be honest with your colleagues. Thank you, Penelope, who likes the colour on my wall. Oh, that's good. Peacock blue, I don't know what colour it is. Yeah, well, you know, so what else are you going to take away? So over to Jeremy, what are you going to take away from the session?
Absolutely stumped now, because it's not. No, I think it's. I mean, we've crammed in an awful lot in 55 minutes, and in fact, for me, it's perhaps prompted more questions than answers to things I want to go and have a look at afterwards.
Yeah.
So I'm going to research and sort of things like the wellness plan. I think it's just things I haven't come across before. So I think that for me, it's more research. Yeah. How I can put it in practice, but specific for the membership.
Yeah.
I think this is an area that, you know, this is the first time we've run this session, and it's obviously an area and as I said, this is the issues at the moment are long term, not short term. We need to do other things like this. So I'm going to sit down and say, okay, what else can we do over the next 6-9 months in this area to help? Resources, partnerships, whatever. So it's a key thing for us. So that's my big takeaway.
Good. Okay. So then our last poll for you all is just to ask you if Jeremy would have us back and you would like us to run a session, complimentary, Jeremy, don't worry. You know, what might you like that session to be in? So if you could vote for what you think it might be interesting for you. So a lot of the feedback here that people are saying is about communication, which is no surprise to us. You know, communication. That's what people, and we do need to be reminded of that. Sometimes we feel like we have communicated a lot, but you know, just in terms of selling, I'm sure you all know, those of you who are in sales, you have to have 7 touch points before somebody buys something. So whether that's why we have to do social media advertising, phone calls, follow-ups, bloody emails again, la 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 la. You know, it takes a lot for people to, you know, to press the button to buy, let alone just to hear. Okay, this is the last poll, and this is the holding difficult conversations. Again, that's what came up with other clients, so that's consistent with other stories we've heard. It is difficult. There are difficult times. There are difficult conversations. I am an HR consultant by trade, as it were, but I'm not an employment lawyer, and these are tricky times. So if we covered something like that, it wouldn't be along the legal aspect. Wait, let me just go back to this. So I'm hoping you've got the man with the pencil, Joe. Got the man with the pencil in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So today we've covered all of these different areas: homeworking, supporting others, and these were some of the useful resources. So what Joe was talking about, number 4, is the mind. So you can click onto that. Jeremy and his team will have a copy of these slides, so you can literally click on that. And then just say we've had that another slide. Thank you so much for being with us today. We can help you if you wanted some virtual counselling sessions. That Joe can help you with that, and any executive coaching for yourself or for your team, and obviously any virtual workshops that you might want. not just in mental health, but I mean in any other sort of management areas, we are very, very happy to help with. So back to Jeremy, Joe and Jana, any final comments from you girls?
No, thank you so much for being great participants and actually getting involved in the chat. It made it so much more pleasant and enjoyable to deliver. It really felt like we were together. So thank you.
Yeah, and really thank you for your honesty in your sharing as well. I know that it's quite a challenge, but it's so important to just be honest and say what's really going on for yourselves, because you are so needed right now for your organisation. So thank you very much. It's I really enjoyed today. Thank you.
So a couple of people are just asking, will you have the notes that are going to be sent? So I believe Nadia will send a link or something, you know, the sort of webinar fairy will sort something out, whether it's on a link or through your website or whatever. Over to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, to say we'll republish the webinar on the website, probably, if not Friday, Monday, along with the various slides. And I think we would really like a follow-up session with yourselves. So finally, just a thank you to Joe and Jana and Alison for this today. As I said, in an hour we've crammed in a lot. It would be lovely to have a longer period, but let's talk about what we can do next time. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and thank you, participants. Lovely to meet you all virtually.